It's really just such a pleasure, such a joy to be here again. I just love this series and just all of the groups that have been working together and just combining forces. It's sort of, we always say, I work at the Racial Equity Institute where I know Tom, and we always say the way we do our work is just as important as the work we do. And I think this combining efforts and this openness to working together has just been phenomenal. So without further ado, Tom Spaulding is one of my heroes. So it's wonderful to have him here. Just has a career spanning multiple decades in the food system, really just trying to do transformative work. And you read his bio, so I won't say too much about that. I know Tom will, fill in any gaps that I miss, but he's a co-founder, former executive director. He's a Racial Equity Institute trainer. And most importantly, he is a person of integrity and conviction and really cares deeply about humanity and the way in which we interface with our food system and our agricultural systems. There is a nexus that really links us in so many ways. And, to the environment, and the way in which we farm speaks to who we are as people. The way we treat the land is the way we treat ourselves at the end of the day. And I think Tom just embodies that understanding in such a deep way. And I've learned so much from him. And so I just value him as a human being, as a colleague, as a friend, as a mentor. Thank you, Tom. And so excited for your talk.
Well, Jean, that was very generous, and thank you so much. And I love and respect you, and I'm so honored to be invited to be in this group. Maybe I know some of you. I see the Presbyterian Hunger Program trying to sign on. Is that Andrew? Is he part of this group?
It should be Andrew.
All right, I may know a few people in here, but for those who I haven't met, thank you for coming online today and being part of the conversation. And as I told Katie and Valentine, maybe I'll tell some good news and maybe I'll tell some bad news today. But it is the news. And I'll just kind of ramble through some stuff here. I'll show some slides, and then I understand we want to have question and answer after I give you a bit of grounding in what I've been up to together with my wife, the Reverend Dr. Nettie Astudillo, who much of what I'm going to share is really her and I working together as a team over the past 30 years since we decided to organize together. We called that marriage. And we met in and around the Earth Summit activities in 1992, when all the social movements came together from across the world at this intersection between economic development and environmental health of the planet. And so we met in and around those spaces and ended up getting married and doing everything I'm going to share with you, we did jointly, most of it. And I'm in Florida right now, and that's largely because of my wife's work. She's here organizing cross-faith around climate justice issues. And I stepped back from full-time farming. I ran the livestock at Angelic Organics in Illinois. The farm I'm going to speak to and the community of people I'm speaking to is around Illinois, right near the Wisconsin border. We say when we were there that we could throw a rock and hit Wisconsin. We were based on a 200-acre certified organic, but influenced largely by biodynamics growing space. There was a lead farmer there. Maybe some of you have heard of him, Farmer John Peterson, who was profiled in the film Real Dirt on Farmer John, if you ever saw that film on PBS. Anybody familiar with that? I can't see everybody right now, but let me go back to gallery. Anybody who's on screen who's seen that film? One or two? Okay, not too many. All right, well, it's out there. You can find it if you want that history. But nevertheless, I mean, when I met Nettie, I was already, a young man who was doing work in the Chicagoland area. I was working for an international organization. I had worked at the United Nations. I was working at the YMCA, the USA's International Division, on anti-poverty programs across Latin America. I had been raised by some people and my grandparents, great aunts, great uncles who were interested in the same intersections between poverty and the land. So in any event, I think one of the phrases I've shared with Gene before at that Earth Summit was the U.S. ambassador, kind of to block progress for the world, said the American way of life is not up for negotiation. And through the racial lens of Racial Equity Institute, which we're partners in that work, Gene and I, that really is about the white way of life is not up for negotiation. The history of this country and how it's treated land, as she said, is the same as we've treated people, as an extractive enterprise. And we certainly saw evidence of that. And that moment at the Earth Summit really is what made me committed to come back home, not to work overseas, and to really be part of the process of renegotiating the American way of life here on the ground that I was raised on, where I was born. And that sent us eventually, I think, towards a deeper connection with the land in Illinois. I'm from California. My wife's from Venezuela. Neither of us had deep roots in Illinois, but we developed a relationship with one of the first CSAs in the country that was called Angelic Organics, and became, I helped organize the core group, the volunteer members around the Chicagoland area that became very closely associated with the farming team. And we formed committees. We formed committees based on what the community wanted to do. We had communities, we were looking at food security issues. We were looking at access for people that were living in some of the lower income neighborhoods where Nettie and I lived. We lived in, if anyone's familiar with Chicago, we lived in Uptown. We lived in, which was largely Black and Hispanic and Asian, poorer section of the north side of Chicago. And so we were organizing in that environment and connecting people out with the farm. So as the farm grew, from an initial, membership of maybe 100 shareholders, it eventually grew into something that was about almost 3,000 families. And the production went from, a couple of acres up to about 60 acres of vegetables in rotation over the last 30 years. Some of the relationships that Nettie and I had in Chicago, we worked, I was one of the first volunteers in something called the Kovler Center, the Center for Treatment of Survivors of Torture, that opened in Chicago in my neighborhood. And so many of the relationships that we developed out of that, from people that had come to the United States from around the world looking for asylum, and also just trying to build a life back for themselves, we started doing partnership experiences together with the Kovler Center out to the farm. And when we first started thinking about building out from the CSA and creating a nonprofit organizing and education arm of the CSA farm, Nettie and I wanted to do that work jointly with the Kovler Center. And so some of our initial proposals were really to do that work in partnership with the Kovler Center. That eventually did not work out, but Nettie and I moved with our 3 children out to the farm to help organize this center. And we got promised from the farm that we could glean vegetables, and the rest, everything else we had to fundraise. So we did, and we grew that initial operation of the nonprofit arm, which we called Angelic Organics Learning Center, out to about, I don't know, from about a $20,000 to $30,000 operation to about $1 million, $1.5 million with 30 staff, and organizing in Chicago, an urban farm incubator, in Rockford, Illinois, which is nearby where the farm was, an urban farm incubator. And then we ran programs, farmer training programs, and built out alliances, farmer alliances and consumer alliances around the region. And we're we're co-founders of multiple alliances, advocates for urban agriculture that's based in Chicago, that's a very committed urban space farming systems organization now on its own. We launched them into life as fiscal sponsor and as one of the co-organizers of that. Anyway, I'm just giving you a sample, a basis kind of to understand kind of what led up to us wanting to protect some of this land and think about how to hold land in common to protect the farm organism, as we called it, but also the social organism that was developing around it, with all the different parties related, cross-race, cross-class, cross rural and urban, that we felt we wanted to somehow honor as we were trying to protect the land. So I did want to show a few slides to give you a sense of the spaces that we were working. I went back, I pulled up, because I haven't been executive director of the Learning Center since 2018. It's been 5 years since I left and lived in, and now living in Florida. But So some of these are a little bit dated, but they'll give you a flavor of kind of what the center looked like at the time. This is probably 10 years ago, but the Angelic Organics Learning Center, we said, was talking about good food, and good food being something that was healthy, ecological, green, fair, and culturally expressed, like it was based out of the culture of the region and the people that we were building the food system around. And we talked about this thing called quadruple bottom line for us always was, it has to be good economically, it has to be good around equity, it has to be good around ecology, and it has to be good around expression. That's human expression, culture. And so those were kind of our guiding pillars. And that's what we said was sustainable. When people talked about sustainable, it's such a mushy word, but for us, this is the framework that we use to do the development of our programming. We ended up with 5 major areas of work in the nonprofit arm of the farm. Again, this is growing alongside that CSA that was growing up to 3,000 family members, was this nonprofit that an organizing arm that did farmer training. We organized probably 100 farms in our northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin to work together. We would do on-farm education with schools and universities. We probably had 5,000 people a year coming through the farm. We did organizing where we built up some of these coalitions that I mentioned, like Advocates for Urban Agriculture, Roots to Farm, Chicago Community Food Security Coalitions, these kinds of things we were engaged in our organizing arm. But then there was this Farms Forever initiative, we called it, where we were saying we wanted to make this thing, we could protect this in perpetuity, this work of the social organism and the farm organism. These were just some of the examples of some of the organizing we felt that we could do from the positionality of situatedness of being with our feet kind of in relationships in the urban areas, but also in the rural areas. And some of these have continued to grow and prosper. Some of them have gone on by the wayside as other things have come up and gone. And we became part of, the national, I think we were the second out of land stewardship. I know many of you are in Minnesota. I think we were the second land stewardship project replication of the Farm Beginnings program. And then out of the group that formed out of that, we helped co-found the Farm Beginnings Collaborative that still continues to this day, I think now in 14 states. And then let me switch over to a different thing here, and this is that 5th area of our work, which was trying to develop some way of protecting all this by holding the land perhaps differently, because when we noticed early on that the farmer owning in a very precarious economic position and owning the core 22 acres of this operation, it was like, okay, we got to do something about that. And this is an aerial view of what became Angelic Organics Farm here. He was a conventional farmer that was, thousands of acres that went bankrupt in 1985 and thought he'd never farm again. It was a 3rd generation family farm, dairy, hog operation, conventional, sprayed every spray that was on the market. And during that period of crash, John encountered the work of Rudolf Steiner, biodynamics, and other organic founders, and he started to say, I'm going to do this differently. And so when he reopened on 22 acres rather than thousands, he had a commitment to this being certified organic and to kind of living out of that idea that Steiner brought forth, which was within kind of Western traditions of farming, brought an idea forward of a living organism as the farm. And as the social entity and community entity around it. So I think that's the vision John had as he and other farmers got the farm up and going again. And then when Nettie and I encountered the CSA, we saw this as a model where some of the things we were concerned about of trying to rebuild maybe the American way of life and reclaim it for us was building off of our relationships around this piece of land. So this is just some views of the production at Angelic Organics, some of the people and the harvests. The focus, we always said we were soil farmers first and then crops and livestock later, but the soil being critical. And, this is a farm that does 2 years of cover cropping and for every 2 years of vegetable production. All of our livestock that I ran was all in managed livestock with, moving around kind of like savory or very intensive management graze, looking to restore degraded oak savannas with livestock. Of course, the community that built out from the farm, there was festivals and celebrations. We had bees. We had two, as I said, urban incubator farms. This is Anton, who was one of our staff for many years. He's gone on to lead now an organization that's really focused on BIPOC farmers in Chicago. These are just pictures of some of the on-farm education. We bring people out. We had orchards. We have flowers. We had milk goats. We would train people on how to milk goats, how to make cheese, how to make goats milk cheese. We had all kind of workshops. We worked closely with some of the people that we met through Kovler Center. I think this child really came through some of the group. There was a group in Chicago called Ecovida, which was founded by a Salvadoran refugee that we had met through the Kovler Center. And so we partnered together. We used some of our land to grow out their chili peppers that they were selling through churches in Pilsen neighborhood of Chicago. But they also wanted to learn how to milk goats and make milk and cheese and to pass some of that on to their kids. We would do festivals. This was some artists that made giant puppets and would do puppet shows, no kids allowed. I love that sign. And the kids just love this kind of stuff, educational stuff. This is John Peterson in the white shirt. He's now 75 years old. It's one of the reasons why we work so hard. And right now, at this moment, yesterday I was on a 3-hour phone call. We're talking farm succession. We've tried multiple strategies to do farm succession. Part of the reason we entered into these conversations around how to hold the land was because we knew we all get old, right? I'm 65 now. He's 75. At some point we get injured. We can't keep doing the work we're doing. We have to make these strategies in place so we can pass on farm enterprises. And part of the reason we do that is to protect all of what these images you're seeing. By the way, that's me when I was younger doing the horse-drawn haying, mowing with our draft horses, which Nettie and I both got trained by some old farmers in Michigan how to do draft horse work. And so we would, just play with those and do different things. But it was a mechanized farm. It was pretty much, this is some of the farmer training work we're doing. A lot of the senior leadership on the farm was, Hispanic, Latino, Latina leadership, largely, along with Farmer John. I think some of the most senior people have been on the farm probably almost 30 years since it became organic. And of course, brought amazing skills with them when they originally moved into the area and now have, bought homes and settled very near the farm. This is some of the livestock herd. We did a barn raising. We raised a first barn in 100 years on our farm in this area. And that was the believing in the future. You don't build a barn like this unless you believe in the future. And so we just kind of leaned in. It was all done by hand. This is my wife, Nettie. Reverend Nettie Astudillo with her mother, who's from Cali, Colombia. And as I said, she's in the next room doing her work. If we need her, we can pull her in, Jean. This is one of the urban incubator farms. This is in the middle of the Rockford Housing Authority in Rockford, still operating right now. The lead farm manager is a young man named Yadi Moore, who we met when he was just a teenager. He's now the leader of this farm in the Rockford Housing Authority, and that's a partnership between us, some Black-led organizations in the neighborhood, as well as Rockford Housing Authority. And we brought together probably, I don't know, $500,000 of investment from the community and nonprofits and from government agencies to put in coolers and processing sheds and get the tools and equipment needed so that farm could really be a viable small CSA in the middle of the Rockford community that, as we know, the government likes to call a food desert. As we know, deserts are not naturally occurring and certainly better named food apartheid. But this is just one of the examples of that space. Again, farmer training. This is Babe, our draft horse, helping kids fall in love with the farm. And of course, there's other ways to fall in love with farms, like leaping from bales. Anyway, so what do we want to protect? We want to protect that farm, right? The 3-4 generations that it took to get to that farm, perhaps even some of the legacy that came before this farm. And if you go back, I mean, this is 1830 Indian Removal Act land that was really then settled by white settlers who came in. And so some of that history we wanted to recapture when we started to talk about holding this land in community. The Learning Center, which we've already talked about, what we wanted to protect. This is our vision statement for the future. I think you get a picture, right? This is what we want. We want to protect the land in perpetuity for organic and biodynamic agriculture, farming, education, land regeneration. Thank you. My wife just put a sign in here says I should breathe. I'm trying to get done in half an hour. Okay, here's some of the questions we asked. Besides the question of what happens if any of us get hit by a bus, some of us who are in principal leadership roles and some of all of this, the nonprofit, the for-profit, we wanted to know how we could ensure coming generations would enjoy the benefits of these. How would we manage those successions when getting into farming is so difficult? When it's stacked in, especially if you're not a person who's racialized as white and can't inherit land. I mean, John inherited land from his parents precisely because he was situated on the land, and his grandparents situated on the land had opportunities to get land. How can the experienced leadership on the farm that are Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Chicano, how can they be better positioned to be junior farmers in the transition? We had those questions. And how we're going to find resources for people to buy out the farm at the time that it needs to transition. And then we were interested in what to do with the additional land we had acquired, because we didn't only have the 22 acres that the farmer owned, but we also had a 39 acre that we bought from a neighbor using, funds from the community. I think, we had 19 shares that bought a neighbor's parcel of 39 acres, but it was a 15-year LLC that held the land until we could figure out how to hold it more long-term. So that was going to sunset in 2014. And then we really wanted to have the relationship between the nonprofits we were working with on the land and the for-profit farm have this balance of freedom and community together, somehow be a container for that, an umbrella for that. And then we wanted to get everything into long-term land tenure agreements. And we wanted to be able to share this with the other farmers that we'd been working with, because we had built up a network of more than 100 farms in our region. And so we looked at, multiple strategies that we wanted to involve, right? So farmer succession planning, some of us got trained. I got trained in farm succession planning through the University of Wisconsin and other networks. We looked at, all these multi-stakeholder kind of efforts to bring cash to the table. So we wanted 0 to 2% loans, or we wanted people to give gifts. We wanted to engage people in this long-term vision. We wanted to talk about different people that are in the community that would have governance roles over the land use rights and decisions. We looked at community land trust models that held working lands. We looked at people using land conservation easements. And we looked at some examples of people that were using 99-year leases with for-profits and nonprofits, both in this country and outside the country. And these were some of the inspirations that we had as we moved around. Some of them were biodynamic related, some of them were not. Certainly the community in Järna, Sweden, which was inspired out of biodynamics, was one of our principal inspirations, because we just happened to visit there after a conference that we went to that was hosted by the Biodynamic Association in that area. And we found that they had some models they developed for decades ago, where they had land trust, community land trust, that held land in perpetuity for a variety of organizational entities that were for-profit, nonprofit. Some of them were like cultural facilities, of dance studios, all the way to a dairy, and everything in between. And so, those were very inspiring. We looked at some things in this country, things close by, Troy Community Farms in Wisconsin. Some of you may be familiar with combined housing with a urban farm production, had different relationships between the land trust and long-term leases for farmers. One of my personal big influences, maybe some of you knew him, was Chuck Mathai, who was founder of Equity Trust, who developed some of the models that got used around the country with farmers that we knew personally. And so we borrowed and stole, and Chuck spent time with us on the farm and in the relationship with some of our stakeholders, really talking through some of the options and what worked and what didn't work on farms like Roxbury Farm and Live Power Farm in California, when there was community holding land. One of the other things that influenced us was associative economics, which also looks within the biodynamic realm, kind of at this field of how do we get out of this marketplace mentality and into something where we take care of our brothers and sisters as a purpose of economics rather than profit as being the focus. Liberty Prairie Foundation, Illinois, very near us, was doing some experimentation with land leases and farm incubation that we were close to. And Yggdrasil Land Foundation, Living Lands Trust, probably a lot of you are familiar with their work around some of the trusts that we looked at when we were forming our land trust in 2013. We looked around and we saw a very few handful of land trusts that were holding working lands, farmlands. And these were some of the ones. This is from a slide from 10 years ago that was like, who we were looking at and borrowing from. And Agrarian Trust, I know, came into being right around the time that we founded our community land trust to try and pull 200 acres together. So I think I've gone over kind of what we were hoping to get out of this, right? We were building this off those 4 E's, the economy, equity, ecology, and expression. And we ended up acting on a bunch of these parcels. This is kind of there's a piecing together of parcels that make up about 200 acres. They're all held differently still to this day, but 3 of them now out of these, 1, 2, 3, there's 5 parcels here. 3 of the 5 are majority or outright held by our association, which is our community land trust that we created out of this farm initiative. The 2 urban farms I was talking about are now held. One is still in the hands of the Rockford Housing Authority, and that one we've been talking about long-term leases at least. And the one that's in Chicago is now farmed by one of the incubated farmers, is Dulce and Juan Cedillo Produce. They're now full-time farming that and that was, Neighbor Space Land Trust in the city of Chicago owns that land. But they're able to continually farm that land now and make money off it and sell it multiple farmers markets in an agricultural district of the city that was moved forward by groups like Advocates for Urban Agriculture and other colleagues and supporters in the city of Chicago that have worked on really changing the framework and the zoning and the policies of the city so that farms like Cedillo Produce can actually operate, because 20 years ago that wasn't the case in Chicago. So we created Angelic Organics Association as this kind of umbrella that we wanted to be a holder of the land, but also an umbrella for leasing in a collaborative fashion to different entities that we had, plus ones that we were envisioning. The middle one there, number 3, has been created since this slide was created. We have a lodge, we have a commercial kitchen, we have overnight facilities for classroom experiences. So teachers can bring a classroom of up to 35 students and stay on the farm and do a week long of study and interning within the farm organism. So that's in place. Enterprise 4, the dairy, we tried to get some neighbor land that would have been the base for that, and we were the second highest bidders and lost out to a corn and soybean grower who brought deeper pockets to the table. All right, so then the next steps, you can see the first thing we did was form our community land trust back in 2013. And then we started acquiring land with social investors, either gifts, $25 all the way up to, $300,000, right? People, we asked for gifts. And then if couldn't get gifts, we got 0 to 2% interest social investors to give us, 15-year 0 to 2% loans. And so that is what we did on that sunsetting land, the 39 acres. We now have a new 15-year LLC where the association, our land trust, owns 10 of the 19 shares. So we have majority ownership in the LLC that's going to sunset now in 2029. So we're actively trying to figure out how to get that 100% into the association. The 10 acres that we built the lodge on for that commercial kitchen, and that was bought in 2016 from a neighbor who died. His daughter turned to us and said, if you can make me an offer in 30 days, we'll sell you the land. And we managed to do that. We went to this is the social organism that grows up, the community of people that's so amazing that can uplift and continue to support this kind of collective work. And then in 2016, we also bought out the farmer John Peterson as one step towards farm succession, so that the association holds that farmstead of 23 acres, so that we could make sure that his business sold, but not the land. That was the idea. And then negotiating farmer succession. Some of these things are things we're still working on. All the details of, we're in MOUs and annual leases that are, we have 99 leases that are, believe it or not, still under negotiation to this day on some of these parcels, but we're working on all those. So what's worth protecting, all that stuff. And for me personally, all those community relationships, the creatures that roam the land, whether they're grasses, cows, or in this case, my son Adam here flying a kite out in the cow pasture. So let me just stop there, because that's 30 minutes, and maybe we can just dig in around some of this work and kind of what's happening. I do want to mention two things without the slideshow, and that is that for all of our good intentions, we fall short on a lot of stuff, and do today, as we did over the last 11 years of having the land trust in place. By 2017, 2018, our farmer was having, the vegetable farmer, the for-profit enterprise that runs the CSA, was having a huge financial crisis due to a lot of medical debt, and the fact that CSA farms were kind of under threat from corporate agriculture and from the huge box retailers, the Blue Aprons of the world, the massive venture capital that came in flowing, undermining small farmers, CSA farms, farmers markets, and food cooperatives. And so that resurgence was taking a toll on the financials of the farm. So we almost lost the farm. But I mean, it was down with 24 hours, I would say. We were within 24 hours of the actual farm operation declaring bankruptcy. That's how close we were. But I want you to know, the good news of that moment was, because the association was in place, because we had developed a network and an associative economic network, you could say, of people that believed in what we were doing, we were able to find enough, kind of stopgap funding to deal with the cash flow crisis and put the farm, I mean, it's still operating today, 5 years later, 6 years later. Not that it's out of the woods, but it's still alive. And so I'd say the land trust was more important in that moment as this web of social relationships and what we call a social organism at that moment that really helped the farm stay afloat. The other thing that I would say is that, where's my other note on that? My other thing that I was going to tell you about that was that, the other big crisis is, I would say we're in the middle of it right now. And I had some notes I scribbled down, but I'm not even seeing where I put them. But, we're trying to do, we've tried 2 rounds of proposals of farm succession. We had an LLC proposal about 4 years ago where we were going to build in equity for the senior Latino leadership in the farm into the transition, and acquire, bring in some new farmer stewards into the mix that would bring some capital as well, and buy out Farmer John Peterson and his wife Heidi, so we could make that transition. And that fell apart. It fell apart from a variety of stresses, some of which were internal to the relationships between the for-profit and the nonprofit entities that we have. And so, I want to say the bad news is we didn't succeed in that transition. And now we're 5 years down the line with the lead farmer being 70, almost 75. He turned 74 he's turning 75 in August. And he's not well anymore physically, right? And he's still running a massive operation for a vegetable operation of this kind. And he needs to retire. And we just had a 3-hour meeting yesterday with a new proposal to try and usher in that stewardship transition. And we don't know if it's going to work, but we're in the middle of that right now, very deeply concerned that could fall apart. So, yeah, anyway, let me stop there. Just kind of open to my facilitators and see where you want to go with all of this.
We were thinking that, in fact, Tom, that we would do breakout rooms, because we have, on this call, we have folks who are in the North Central SARE region, which is the most of the organizers on this call are representing, and then also Agrarian Trust is sort of wearing two hats, where we have two sustainable agriculture research education grants, to not speak in acronyms to people. That's what SARE stands for. And we have a Northeast SARE as well. And so we were thinking we could take a poll and see if we have, Northeast folks on the call, we can go and get into a Northeast breakout room. And then we can have our North Central folks in a breakout room, and we can gather questions and have some discussion, then all come back and kind of share some of our questions for you, Tom. And you just, have a wealth of experience. So by the way, can we just give Tom kind of a round of applause for just being able to summarize that much? That's sort of incredible. And just thank you for all the work that you've done, the trial and error, just for being in this work and sharing it, because, those who are trying to be practitioners in this space, whether we're farmers coming from an ag background, or we're farm service providers, or we're just community members who really care about the future of agriculture in our communities and land access and equity, we need to see what's come before, what's being tried, what's being tested, models from around the world, just getting exposure to many of the things that you listed. I know that my research list is just like a mile long just from this talk. I don't know, is anyone feeling that way? Like a lot of you just want to Google a bunch of things? Yeah, I see some nods. So and someone in our group, Mario, did you want to say something before we had to leave? Oh, hey Mario, did you have something you were gonna chime in with before we left our group? We didn't want to miss you if you had something you wanted to add. You're on mute.
I was inspired by their work working with the Latino community up in northern Chicago. I've always wanted to visit. I've heard of the inequity problems, the low financial income status neighborhoods that they have. And, coming from Nicaragua, there's a stigmata too in Latin American countries that you're a farmer, that you're really not really important. But we all know that, people need a farmer 3 times a day: breakfast, lunch, dinner. And also the way they the 4 E's. I can't really remember them, but if I know notes are going to be shared and things like that of the slide. But when I look at it, approach when I come back to my circle tonight, the Venture Farming Institute virtual class and field trip sites, the virtual class on Tuesday, I'll definitely be relating this information to them, because I feel like we're all one community. We can all learn from each other and piggyback off each other and get ideas of how to really resolve these problems. I think that Jimmy Potter said something very important, that this is not just for now. I may sound drastic, but the day I leave this earth, I want to leave the good baton to those people that are going to be real responsible and have care for the land, like a lot of us do. And we want a better world for everyone, and that's what I really wanted to add to the comments.
Anything you want to add, Nettie?
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Mario. And he put the 4 E's in the chat for us. So economy, equity, ecology, and expression, meaning like cultural expression, for those who might have missed the first part of the talk where we talked about some of the values. So does anyone want, maybe I don't know if anyone took notes from the North Central group, but I took notes for the Northeast, and I'd be happy to share some of our discussion and questions just in summary, and then pass the mic to who wants to speak for North Central. Does anyone want to summarize? And then, we can just let folks, popcorn. Is there anything that you want to ask Tom? Anything you want to share? Feel free to also use the chat to make sure we get everybody's questions in with the limited time we have. So if you have a question, I think it'd be great, go ahead and pop it in the chat now so we don't miss anybody and we're not scrambling at the end. But I'll just summarize really briefly, just 30 seconds, to say folks were struck by the complexities surrounding collective ownership and farmer transition, and the challenges around that. And details matter was a statement that came up. It really matters how all of this hangs together, how it operates. Folks were curious about the employment status of the 30 employees on the farm and just their relationship in terms of, are they being paid well? Do you have metrics that kind of look at surveying employees, how are they relating? Are they supported? How can farms be supportive? Because agricultural labor, as you know, there's just that long history of exploitation. So how do you guard against exploitation in your model and in your approaches? And so just looking at American agriculture and wage labor and that whole long history of exploitation, we talked a little bit about, what are steps you can do to ensure if you do get to a certain scale that there's fairness. I was curious, was there ever any interest in a worker-owned cooperative? And so those were some of the things we talked about. We just said it was such a powerful and insightful talk. In a lot of ways, we'd love to see a lot of case studies documenting these moments of transition, because one of the folks in the group noted that 20, 30 years ago, a lot of projects get started, maybe 15 years ago, they have complex legal arrangements that seem like they work. And then ultimately, when you get to the point of transition, the gaps and the difficulties and the challenges become more apparent. The things that aren't really working become unignorable all of a sudden. And so we were interested in those types of things. And so that was it for us. So I'll pass the mic.
I'll just note that Lori wrote the lack of documentation and findability of some of these resources makes it difficult. So it's harder to share when we're doing it like this. And I agree. I think one of the things we were really talking about is key policy changes, pieces of infrastructure, ways to work together that make this work kind of counterculturally. And I think one of the things that we find every month when we connect is like, this is happening more than we realize. And one of the challenges is finding the work if we're not already plugged into the social networks where it's happening. So others in the group may want to pop in, but I had asked right at the end, one of the things we could discuss a little when we came back together is, where are some of the places, either those visiting today or those who've been in the conversation longer, where do you see this organizing happening? Like, where do people find these solidarities and the chance to kind of plug in? Because I think we often see people when they're at a moment of like a specific farm's project. But if you're, many people here want to do this, where are the supports for that?
So people have talked about this before and they say, sorry, my video isn't working very well today. They have said, let's make sure that we appear, whoever the story or the storytellers are, let's appear at this conference. And then I think to myself, conference again is one place, one time. It might be one day, it might be 3. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but then it takes money to go to a conference. So then I think to myself, well, all of these talks are amazing. And I really apologize. I've not been able to come to one since now. I've watched them go by each month and I wasn't able to do. But what I'm trying to say is we can connect here with 27, 34 people. If I knew where to go online and I could even direct others to go, like I'm talking like across the US, and we have regions, just like SARE has regions. And we said, here are these stories from these people. And that is what I'm talking about, of more of even like a some sort of group site that really focuses. And I'm not saying AFT doesn't do it. I'm not saying, Agrarian Trust doesn't do it. I'm just saying, once again, do I know where to look? Is there just really one resource that could help all of us in those that we want to also reach out to say, boy, this is a really comprehensive place to go. And now I'm going to tell so-and-so about this. So thanks.
I just want to say thank you, Lori, for saying that and for that push. Also, I think a lot of the organizations here exist because the USDA isn't fully doing its job. Honestly, the USDA should be doing all of this. And that's on some level the reality, but they can't because of their checkered history and the difficulties they have in navigating communities. And so we're here filling gaps, and we really should have a 100-year farm plan for the nation or longer. We don't have a national farm policy, not really, as far as how are we going to transition farmland. This is a government scale problem, and a bunch of nonprofits isn't going to solve it, to be honest. it's a systemic problem. It's a systemic crisis. And we're here filling gaps on some level. So we're very humble in our ability to do some of this work and just acknowledge the scale of it. But I think what you said is powerful and important.
Well, 100%. And that's what I'm saying. Thank you to all of those who are doing this work. And you are absolutely correct. We have no food farming policy in the country. We have commodity and trade policy like nobody's business, but local food policy nationwide, I'm 100% behind you. Thanks.
And I'll go ahead and chime in. Yes, Lori, I agree with that. And I think Valentine and I, we've talked about this in the past of kind of like this knowledge commons for all of this body of work to reside. And I think there's some conversation that's happening. I think what University of Minnesota, is that correct, Valentine? Library or system or something is interested in helping be a part of like that kind of knowledge commons. But one of the thoughts that I think about that this body of work could also connect to when we're talking about grassroots and solidarity is also looking at the cooperative ecosystem and the cooperative movement, where the food sovereignty work that takes place amongst folks, for instance, within the National Black Food and Justice Alliance and other groups could really help connect this work. And then as you know, when we're talking about that collective landholding models, a lot of it almost comes back down to cooperation, comes back down to that collective land model holding and governance that co-ops innately have in their structuring and development. So there may be some segues there, and also maybe lead to some creative elements when you look at some of the different bodies of work that's taking place around housing co-ops and whatnot. Is that transferable, or those approaches kind of transferable when we're looking at the land access component? Because many of the same models are used as well within the housing holding when we're talking about community land trust and different things of that nature. So I just wanted to just bring highlight to that because of the questions that were asked. And I think this is a good space to start and to build out from. It's slowly growing as we continue to do these and becoming more engaging. And so it's like, how do we build or connect that bridge to these other movements as we're doing this? Which I think Thomas had mentioned is there's a level of intentionality if we want to get there.
I kind of like to add a bit to more of what on the lines of what you were sharing, and not to be in a petty sense, but I see the difficulty it is for me as an urban farmer who lives in a neighborhood that has all the nonprofits around them beating the drum of food desert and poverty and food insecurity. And it's been over a decade. I am struggling with why my neighbors, who are even family members, don't have capacity and urgency to participate in just me doing a good job. I'm saying that to say this is not necessarily a secret. It's because that's how big land access is. You know, it is definitely the job that they make it more accessible. But the question is how many of us are actually that interested, invested in doing the work? I talk with urban growers often, and I say to them, you could do even better health-wise if you walked away from your job. Your job is the thing that's stressing you the most. You absolutely can turn your backyard into scale because I've done it. So I guess my point is that I think for a while, this work is going to seem a bit isolating, as if someone's strategizing for the people to not get the information. But as someone who has wear the title as outreach worker, AmeriCorps Vista, and 1,000 other things in my own neighborhood, I see that the people around us, the general population, aren't interested in where their food comes from. And I'm not saying they aren't interested as in they don't want to be interested, but they're busy paying bills. So those are the skills I want. How do I get the people that should be interested in it, that it is impacting their health the most, to be more involved with not spending too much money around ownership of lots that are now almost dirt cheap in Youngstown? Anybody can own a side lot. Anybody, a group of family members can come together and own a side lot, $250, $75. But do they have the capacity of management? Do they have the capacity of all of these other resources that will be needed to maintain that? So that's where I'm struggling. I'm so grateful for this space here, and I'm grateful for the bigger spaces that is teaching me more, but it's because I'm hungry for it. And God knows I tried to bring other people to this space, but I'm still the only one showing up. Those are the skill sets that I need to get the folk that really it's impacting, to get them more involved, to better understand, because we need people power. That's really what we need.
I have a question for you, Sophia. Is when you were saying getting folks involved, what type of activities are you doing to kind of share the urgency or importance, or to even connect with folks on the grassroots level? Because I know it's an uphill balance or a challenge, because we're having to change people's behaviors. Even looking at, that's a healthy food and eating, a preference and choice and change of behavior, just as it is also when I look at the co-op space and people participating there, overcoming capitalism, whatnot. So is we have, these instilled systemic foods introduced to us throughout our childhood and into adulthood, to where we almost innately have these bad eating habits by the time we become adults. So what are some of the things that you're doing to engage or to share that messaging, et cetera, and to bring some urgency into the conversation?
Well, one, besides actually being a resident, like I live in the neighborhood that I'm advocating for. I'm a homeowner in the neighborhood that I'm advocating for. I was born and raised here. And with all of my degrees and skill sets, I've done cooking classes. I've done farm education 101. I've had apprentices actually come to see me do a more urban homesteading piece, where I'm not only owning my ancestral home, but the lots that are around me, I have reclaimed and repurposed into growing food. So visibly, you can come see what I'm doing. And I have worked with probably every nonprofit that says they're neighborhood development or CDC funded in our area, that is strategized to healthy, nutritious food access. I'm the Mahoney Food Access Initiative Director. So I'm also offering Gardening 101, which is actually bigger than gardening, because I'm working directly with local farmers in the surrounding areas to teach scale, variety, seasonality, and startups. And these aren't just hobby farmers. These are farmers that farm beyond me, which are on bigger spaces, but still small scale farming around regenerative agriculture. I participated in probably all of the festivals and events to give away plants and do seed starts. I partnered with most of the neighborhood block watchers to do a seed donation event that I hold annually every year for the last 3 years. I was a market farmer at market for about 3 years, where I was producing 70% of what was on my table. And that's where I discovered advocacy was a better utilization of who I was, because I was arguing with my customer base on why my Cherokee heirloom tomato should be the cost of Walmart's food. And then I realized, instead of being angry with the people who I live with, because I'm not moving no time soon, I needed to figure out how I could be better utilized. And I'm better utilized as someone providing resources and services and education that specifically meets the uniqueness of Northeast Youngstown and where we are. As a matter of fact, I'm now the co-chair to Central Appalachian Network Beginning Farmer Program, because Youngstown is also considered Appalachia. So with all the resources that I bring, with sitting on all the tables and wearing all the hats, and even directly knowing the mayor, that's the question that I'm often asking what resources that I'm offering that aren't good or not resourceful, and regional work, regional as in the Momanyi Valley, not just my neighborhood. So this partnership that I have with probably 4 other partners and throughout the state, I don't think there's much I've not done around, in my community store initiative, which I just wonderfully been able to fund a mural on the side of a store that is selling fresh produce. So from market, scale, variety, seasonality, connecting people to food, connecting people to farmers, from education, from one-on-ones, real relationship building, regenerative agriculture, being an affiliate of OFA, sharing their organic plan. Like there's a million and one ways. Working with the extension agency, I've been a double
Hey,
keynote.
Sophia, I'm sorry to interrupt. We actually are at time. We're overtime for the talk. And I would love to schedule a time to have you come speak with our Northeast SARE group, actually, if you would like to, just to share more about what you're doing and where there could be mutual support if you'd be interested. I just wanted to give our organizers here a chance to close out the session. But
Sure,
thank you so much
respond.
for everything you're doing.
Yeah, I was just kind of responding to the question that he was asking on what exactly I was doing to get the people around me interested. I kind of was just kind of
Awesome.
sharing the list. So, but thank you.
No, thank you. And so I just wanted to say we've got a bunch of questions in the chat that came up that I don't know if we're going to get to this time around. I do invite us to just maybe give Thomas another round of applause. Thank you for joining us, Tom, and fellow organizers, if you'd like to say a word to close us out. And if folks want to hang on for a couple remaining questions, feel free. And Tom, we're so grateful for you and your time. But if you have to hop, we totally understand. We would love to just stay in touch by email and pass these along, these questions and these notes.
I'll just jump in and say thanks so much to Tom and to all of you for coming and being here and participating in all of the great work that you're all doing. I'm sure that we could have a presentation from every single person who's here. I will be sending out the recording for this in the next week or two, so watch for that from me, as well as information on our next presenter, who Tom has gladly been hyping for us today, and that'll be Nettie. And so she'll be joining us in early June, I believe. So we'll confirm that date and details for you all. And yeah, send that recording and slides from Tom afterwards. And feel free to send me any questions if you have them. You have my email, and I'll put it in the chat as well.
Thanks so much, everybody.